reality and the unearthly is faint. Here we dive headfirst into the dark tunnel, revealing the ghosts of the unexpected. Engage with authors who've honed their craft. Embark with us, dear listener, on a journey into the shadowy realms of the dark side, a land where the border between reality and the unearthly is faint. Here we dive headfirst into the dark tunnel, revealing the ghosts of the unexpected. Engage with authors who've honed their craft in the eerie styles of horror and thrillers. Hear them narrate tales that freeze the blood and hasten the pulse. Each narrative a bone-chilling exploration of the darker recesses of the human psyche. Experience stories that blend fear with fascination, sending shivers down your spine while capturing your curiosity. Each word, each phrase, a plunge deeper into the enigma of the unknown. So courageous listener, fortify your nerves and succumb to the allure of darkness. Welcome to the dark side, where the shadows chatter and the grotesque holds sway.
All right. I'm just putting a little plug in for my latest novel, Predator, the Elite Affair. And it's, well, I was just talking to Kate about this. It's a cross genre. It's thriller, and the last quarter of the book is probably pretty much gothic horror, I would say. But anyway, enough about me. Let's talk to our guest, Kate Haley, and she's coming from down under, all the way in New Zealand, she is. So if you're having trouble with her, well, just a little bit around the corner, right?
Just a little, yeah.
It's about, what is it, a 12-hour flight from, like, say, Chicago to Australia or New Zealand?
Yeah, I think for us it's like 13, 14 hours to get to the States.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, I remember.
And that's probably just to get to LA or something.
Yeah, I know. Everybody I've talked to was like exhausted by the time they got there, because even if you try to sleep on the plane, it doesn't work very well. So, Kate, tell us a little bit about yourself first.
So I'm a speculative fiction author. I work in fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, predominantly fantasy. But yeah, I sort of dabble in pretty much anything. I write what takes my fancy.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, yeah, I'm here today to talk about the horror trilogy that I wrote recently, that has a prequel coming out in 2 weeks, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to put it up here now in a second here. There we are. Gateway to the Stars by Kate Haley. And it is a trilogy or more, possibly, right?
It is, yeah. At the moment, it's a trilogy with a prequel that some fans asked for. I was getting a lot of people going, "Oh, can we have more? Can we have the backstory of these characters? I want to know how this started." Because, yeah, the Gateway to Dark
Stars. Happen. You're going to turn into like Arthur Conan Doyle, where he wanted to kill off. Well, he tried to kill off Sherlock Holmes and Holmes, and the public wanted him back, and he said, "Oh hell no, I'm tired of him."
Yeah, no, I've murdered them. Leave me be.
When did you start writing? Remember the first thing you ever wrote? Was it like high school or college or?
It was even younger than that.
Really?
Yeah, I was in intermediate. I want to say probably for you guys that would be about 6th grade.
Really?
Yeah, and we were doing a short story for school, which was supposed to be like a 1-page short story, and I of course wrote about a 10-page something, and I drew it a cover and all of this kind of thing and handed it in, and my teacher was like, "Oh, this is amazing, A++++, you're so good at this," and I just went, "This is it, this is my destiny." I would have been like 11 or 12 or something.
You had a very supportive teacher that, didn't.
Yeah, I did.
Because I mean, most girls that age, they just maybe write poetry in their diaries, and then they never write again once they get to be 14 or 20. Put it that way. When did you first, and what drew you to horror? Can you remember?
I've always been into horror. I remember my mum kind of being weirded out by it because, you know, when I was a young sort of teenager, I was into like all of the you know, we'd go down to the video store because we still had those back then.
Right.
And you know, I'd want to get out all these like R18 horror films, and my mum was like, okay, well, no. And I'm like, but they look so good. This is everything that I want. Mum, why?
I know.
So
Well,
I've always kind of been interested in that, in the sort of dark fantasy horror stuff, and it was easier to get, I think, in books when I was younger.
yeah. I think it's something you're almost born with. I can't explain it either, but I mean, I'm not a morning person. I'm a night person, and that's kind of my whole
Yeah.
philosophy. On a moonlit night, I feel comfortable.
My
Yeah, it's funny because in talking to these other authors, I asked them what was the first Universal horror movie they ever saw. You know, Frankenstein, The Mummy, or Dracula, and all of them said the same thing as me. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because our parents would let us watch it because it was a comedy, you know. And when
yeah.
I was a kid, the only place you could see them would be like, you know, the Midnight Bengali horror show or something like that. So it's not like today where you can just stream it or you know, you couldn't even. And I doubt if those were even on VHS when they first came out. You know, I remember the first machine I had was a Betamax, which was superior, but you know, yeah. And now I think you said you read the classics, right? Well, how old were you when you read Poe and Lovecraft and others?
I'm not 100% sure how old, but would have been sort of mid-teens, I think. I would have been doing
Oh,
that
really?
in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Your mom didn't have a problem with that.
No, well, that was the thing, was that I was given stuff to read because that was okay. It was sort of, you know, I remember I think one of my first, when I was 13, it would have been my first year at high school here, with the way
Hmm.
that schools work. And we had to do a short story for class again, creative writing piece, and they wanted us to rewrite a fairy tale. And now
Hmm.
I wanted to be rewriting. I was at the time I was reading Bram Stoker's Dracula. I was like,
Ah,
does
that a girl.
it? And so I was just like, does it count? Can I rewrite Dracula? And they were like, absolutely not. A fairy tale. Come on. And
Oh
so I
well,
rewrote. Well, what I did was
I would have said,
rewrite.
"Hell, go for it." Yeah.
Whatever. My teacher at the time said no. And so I went, right, well, I'm going to cheat the system. And I rewrote Snow White, where Snow White was a vampire and the queen was trying to stop her. And basically, and she hired, like the queen hires Van Helsing to come and stop Snow White. And my mum sort of looked at this and she went, "You did this all by yourself?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, you know, I'm cheating. I wanted to rewrite Dracula, and I'm not allowed. So here we are."
Right.
And she dug out for me Neil Gaiman's collection of short stories, Smoke and Mirrors, because it's
Hmm.
got the final story in that collection is Snow, Glass and Apples, which is a retelling of Snow White, where Snow White is the vampire and the queen is trying to stop her.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, and
so
she
it
was just
wasn't
like,
original then. But were you aware of
well,
it?
it wasn't, but I had no idea about that. I was, 13
Right.
years old. I had no idea. But she just gave me the book, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I think some people would say a 13-year-old maybe shouldn't be reading. But my mum just
Mm.
sort of hadn't thought of that, and she was like, "Oh, I'm just so like amazed that you came up with the same idea, that this like incredible, one of my favorite authors came up with this, is so amazing, and you can read these stories." And very quickly it became like, okay, well, reading wise, nothing is off limits now. I can do what I like.
Right. And that was one of her favorite authors and series? Your mother's?
Yeah, she loves Neil Gaiman. She loves all his stuff, I think.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, my mom, it's funny. She pretty much let me watch anything and this and that. But I remember one summer, for some reason, that there was the Catholic Legion of Decency or whatever put up a thing of movies you shouldn't watch. Well, I was home alone. I just went and watched all the ones you weren't supposed to watch, of course, you know? Well, you know, Stephen King, you know, his story, right? From like high school and grade school, he would write these, well, his teachers, even in college, kept saying it's derivative, it's Dracula, it's Frankenstein, come on, be original. But he would write stories, and then I don't know if you, before your time and mine, they had those old mimeograph machines instead of copy machines, and it came out with that kind of like a purple ink on it. And he would sell them for like 10 cents a piece to his classmates. But he got called into the principal's office. But you know what the principal did? Probably shaped his whole career. He got him a job at the local newspaper. He recognized that he wanted to be a writer. And that taught him as a teenager how to edit, you know, and not overwrite. Because we all start writing overwriting, you know, with
Oh,
this
yes.
thesaurus and all this stuff in there, and, you know. So, well, we'll get back to that. But, well, let me say one thing, though. Don't you find, like you said, that synchronicity that you came up with the story and that the whole thing of writing is a little bit spooky. I don't care what you're writing, but fiction particularly, but it's like I don't really outline. This book I kind of did a little bit, you know, and I kind of outline up here, make copious notes and stuff. But when you put your fingers to the keyboard, I don't know exactly where the word flow comes from, but when you're really clicking, it just comes right through, right?
Yeah, it does. I'm quite a heavy plotter. I like to outline things,
Hmm.
but I won't always stick to it. I'll be like,
No,
okay,
because
here's my
I think
detailed notes, and
I think it was yeah, I think it was Dean Koontz that said that if your plot's getting stuck in the quagmire, it's because you're trying to force your character to do what you would do. And you can't do that because your character is maybe part of you, but you've got to let them do what they would do in that situation, and it'll just flow right down the page. And I just always remembered that, you know. Although, do you work? You know, what I did, of course, you have repeating characters, but initially they also say write a detailed character sketch of each character so that if you're doing like third or fourth in the series, you remember that he's right-handed, not left-handed, that he likes, I don't know, spinach, but he doesn't like broccoli, you know, that he was Catholic, not Protestant. Do you do that?
I don't actually. It's funny listening to you say that. It's quite interesting. I can absolutely see why that would be important. And
Mm.
now I'm sitting here listening to it going, why don't I do that? Um,
Yeah.
but I think the other thing for me is that just the nature of my writing, why I write, what I'm interested in other people's writing, it's all incredibly character driven. And so for me, I
Mhm.
think that getting to know the characters like they're my friends and just knowing all this stuff about them in the first place, um, I think that that always comes first before a plot line, before anything else. I know
Mhm.
these people really well.
And you know what I found too, when I talk creative writing is if you don't actually have a solid concept, just kind of vague, when you write all these characters, it's kind of like going to shoot you down the chute to writing the story
Mm,
because now you've got all these characters in your head, and you can figure out what to do with them. You know. Well, here's a
yeah.
question for you though. Um, You're really talking about a character arc, right? Where there's a major change in the main character or one of the lesser characters where they have some fault and they want to overcome it, or there's something that has to change in their persona. But now the problem is when you're writing a series, you know, like Sherlock Holmes and James Bond, the fans don't want them to have a character arc. They want them to be the same thing, just right down the road. So, how do you work with that?
Um, I find that there are still ways to make the characters have arcs. There are still things for them to overcome. So, um, in each book, Vincent has his challenges that he needs to overcome. The Gateway to Dark Stars is the first book in the Vincent Temple trilogy, so it follows Vincent for all three books.
Hmm.
And in the first one, he he's this gruff lone wolf who, you know, he's trying to do it alone. He's lost people before. He's been doing this for a long time. He's sort of in his 50s at this point. He's lost a lot of people. And so he's very much trying to save the world on his own. And so in the first one, it's about him overcoming that and learning to work with other people again, and, you know, building the team, if you will, that we're going to take through the series. And then, you know, each following books, he's got to overcome other, you know, sort of deep-seated things that he's been dealing with. So there's always something for them to develop, even though they stay the same sort of person. If you treat a character like they're a person, it's like, actually, you know what? I'm still me. I'm still the person that I've always been. But I like to think I've had quite a bit of character growth in the last few years.
Right. Well, the way Doyle and Ian Fleming painted the characters, he made Bond a blunt force that just goes out and takes names and kicks butts and seduces the girl, and then ends up, you know, in the books, he ended up in the hospital because he got the crap beat out of him. You know, in the movies, they just got silly. And then Sherlock is just like a computer. And I mean, like, I was rewatching the Brit series, and I think it was in the book too, where Watson was astounded that Sherlock didn't know that the Earth revolved around the sun and not vice versa. And he goes, "Well, I don't need that crap in my head. You know, I just have what's in there I need, and the rest is just garbage. I don't want it to clutter my thoughts." You know, but it's kind of a mold he made for the characters, isn't it? Yeah. So I think, that's the problem I have with the slasher movies. There's just no, you know, I'm kind of like, I think we spoke before, you're more of the old school subtle, you know, because Lovecraft said, once you've seen the monster, you've destroyed the whole terror of it all. You know,
Oh,
it's
and I
scratching.
absolutely believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he never really showed I guess he kind of described Cthulhu a little bit, but it wasn't like somebody opens the door and there's the monster. It was like, you know, he's going to open the door and he's going to be mad or destroyed, but he ends it right there let your imagination work, you know. And
And
I
I
think
think
you can do that with film too.
yeah. Well, I think in a lot of ways it works. You can absolutely do it with film. Allude to what's off screen a lot of the time. I think with books it's easier, and, you know, Lovecraft would sort of describe strange, I don't know, strange eldritch horrors, but there was so much room there for you to just sort of read that and form your own mental image of what horror it was.
Right. Yeah. It's supposed to take you out of this world to a different world. And for the time you're reading, now there's one I recommend you to see because it follows that. It's called Curse of the Demon or Night of the Demon from the
Okay.
50s. And it was based on M.R. James's story, Casting of the Ruins. And in it, Dana Andrews is a psychiatrist. He's flying to London to debunk this satanic or black magic cult, right? And the protagonist, and the villain is Julian Carswell, who's very, very British, you know, and he lives in a thing with his mother and everything. But the gimmick is that he knows that Dana Andrews is coming to expose him and destroy his money machine and his reputation, right? So you have that great scene where Dana's researching in the British Library, the one that's just huge with all the little green lamps. And he comes up and he introduces himself and he knocks a folder off the table, and inside it he slips the curse rune. But the producers made him put the demon in the beginning and at the end, but I think it was Jacques Strador vehemently fought against. He said, "No, you're going to ruin the whole thing. It's all in the imagination." And I want the audience to go, were they crazy? Was there really a demon after him, or did he just plant that in Dana Andrews' head, or what? You know. But if you haven't seen it, I think it's on YouTube free. Take a look at it. There's a British and a UK version that's a little longer, but it just, you know, it's like there's a scene where he hands him his, what do they call it then? The Brits calling cards like they used to, you know, just your name basically.
Yeah.
And after Carswell leaves, all the printing just disappears off the card, and he takes it to a chemist, and he said, I can't find there was ever any printing on here. So it's just little subtle, frightening things. And I remember just seeing that movie, not knowing anything about it when I was a teenager, probably on TV, and it just scared the ever living daylights out of me. You know? Yeah.
It
Anyway,
sounds really
moving on. What about we talked about the classics. You've seen some of the classic horror movies, like you said. You saw the Universal and a few of the Hammers, right?
yeah.
What about current horror writers? Is there anybody you like?
Not off the top of my head.
Really?
Yeah. But it's probably just that I haven't found them at the moment. I feel like I'm sort of between things at the moment. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I'm reading at the moment is stuff from other authors that I'm meeting. And that's sort of like taking up a lot of my to be read pile. And most
what
of
about
that
when
is
you were like
fantasy.
a teenager or in your 20s? Did you read some Stephen King back then?
Yeah. So I've read I've definitely read King. I think the first one I started with was It when I was about 15. And I've again like I've always had a thing about clowns, and so my mum was just like, right, this is for you.
Well, it's because they're wearing a mask, more or less, and you don't know what's really under that mask. You know, I mean, they've used it for Halloween and Friday the 13th. It's just kind of Young would say, you know, something from your shadow side that creeps up and scares the hell out of you. You don't know who's behind that mask, right?
Yeah.
Have you read
sure there's the mask aspect of it.
Have you
I
read
think there's also
Poppy Zeebride or John Harris that did The Fury?
No, I haven't read that.
Harris, rather.
But I can put it on my list.
Yeah. Well, see the movie and then get the book, because the book's always better in this case. But it was with Andrew Stevens, who was Stella Stevens' son, and the girl from Carrie. Remember the one that was the cheerleader in the original one, the kind of the good girl, and she want them to dump, her. And it turns out that Kirk Douglas's son is psychic, and it turns out that we'll just call her Mary is psychic, right? But he visits her on like the astral plane, and it's really threaded out really well. And then John Cassavetes plays the head of Morgue, this government agency that's kidnapped Kirk Douglas's son, and this doctor is, there's a scene where like he's like outside running and everything, and just manic, and he says, "Well, what are you giving?" He says, "I'm giving him enough what is it, barbiturates to kill a horse, but it doesn't affect him at all." But yeah, if you got a chance to look at it, The Fury is it's that kind of terror too,
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in there too. And King, well, the problem I have with King and Kuntz is they won't venture out of their own backyard. Everything Kuntz writes is in Southern California. Everything King writes, except for the fantasy, is in New England. I mean, I was asking somebody the other day, I don't know if King ever gets on a plane and goes anywhere. I don't think he does, But
I suppose when you're Stephen King, you don't have to.
What's that? No, but my spirit of adventure is there. I'd want to get just for the mill. I'd want to go to Europe and everywhere and just add that into my stories. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm going to do a podcast the first week in June on the Necronomicon, and that's but I got the real true story about Simon's Necronomicon. But he wrote the Necronomicon, then he wrote a sequel called something about the dead, and I have to admire his writing ability, because the sequel is an autobiography about Peter Lavinda, right? But it's written as if another person was writing his own autobiography, so he's not acknowledging anywhere that this is his story, and I thought, I thought, no, he's talking about himself, obviously, but he was just a bit of a con man from his early ages on. He to avoid the draft, I guess there was a period there in Vietnam where you could join the Eastern Orthodox Church and not even go to seminary. So he and his best friend joined, and they got the robes and everything. And when the Pope came to New York, they actually were invited to sit down at the ecumenical conference with the Pope. So I mean, he's a very intelligent man and all that, but I don't like him keeping up this con about the Necronomicon forever, because some of these teenagers think it's real, and it's very dangerous to play with your psyche like that. Anyway, what was it going to go on to here? Well, let me ask you about some movies, and you tell me if you think they're horror or not. Okay, Dracula, obviously, but what about Alien or Jaws?
Alien, definitely.
Yeah.
The first one. Alien, definitely.
Yeah, first one, yeah, for sure.
It's perfect atmospheric horror.
I mean, it's set in space, but it's they might as well be trapped in a castle or somewhere else. Yeah.
The setting is not irrelevant, but it's not as important as what's taking place, right? It's
right. Yeah, it's a chase scene, but yeah. But it's. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I suppose that the only thing about the setting and that aspect, in terms of, yes, it's sci-fi, but it's also horror, and part of the horror is, I mean, sci-fi lends itself really well to horror just because space is scary.
Yeah.
The whole, you can never be more trapped than you are on a spaceship.
Right. What's the line in the movie? And somewhere else, they still in space, no one can hear you scream. Right. Yeah. And Jaws is fun. I never thought of it that way, but I was doing an interview, and this guy said he went to a horror con and he met Richard Dreyfuss. And I said, well, why was he at a horror con? He said, Jaws. But if you think about it, it was a monster. There's no such thing as a mega shark that's existing today. And it was kind of like, their names are, who played the fisherman? I can't think of his name right now. He's a great actor. But he was kind of like the mentor, right? And the sage and the mage and the thing. And then Roy Schneider was like the practical, guy that said we need a bigger boat, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think there's a definite crossover. And Ridley Scott, who did Alien, I don't know if you saw it, but he did a Showtime series called Strange Angel about Jack Parsons and the OTO and the parsonage in Pasadena. And if you haven't seen it, it's really well done, because Parsons was the father of rocketry. He had no degrees, nothing. He just had it in him. But he was also became a devotee of Aleister Crowley and had the last OTO lodge in the whole world at the time. But it's really good character. Ridley's kind of into horror and sci-fi, I think he really is. And he's a great director. Yeah.
Okay.
What about I asked you what your first horror movie was, and you said It? Probably. No, that was your first book.
That was my first Stephen King book. I honestly don't remember what my first horror movie was. I feel like it was probably something I'm not even going to remember properly. It would have been when I was like 11 or 12 or something. And it would have been something that was on late that I was allowed to stay up to watch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got a real brain tickler for you. What's the first movie you saw on a date? I know most people draw a blank and they have to think about it. It doesn't have to be a horror movie, just whatever the first movie you went to on a date.
The first movie I saw on a date. I don't know. I have a sneaking suspicion it might have been the Simpsons movie.
Oh, really? Well, that's okay. It's good.
Yeah.
I mean, they asked me about horror, and I was already like 27 at the time. But back then you only had 2 or 3 movies playing. You didn't have a whole Cinemax, in the 80s. And I took 3 different girls to see Alien because I didn't mind it at all, and they didn't know I'd already seen it. Right? I could watch that. That's one of those movies where you click it on, and I just sit down and watch. No matter where the movie is in the progression of the movie, I just have to kind of watch the end of it, you know. And I've got
Yeah.
my DVR is just full of everything, you know, everything from Buckaroo Banzai to The Devil Rides Out to oh, Our Man, you know, every kind of movie you can think of. I'm not Quentin Tarantino. I don't have this encyclopedic knowledge of movies, but I don't think there's too many I haven't seen. Yeah.
I was going to say, listening to you talk, it sounds like you very much know what you're talking about. So,
Well, yeah, I was a radio TV film major, like I said, but I wanted something exciting. And back then, well, we're talking Oshkosh, Wisconsin, right? And they had a nice radio TV department in there, but you know, I think in my heart of hearts, I wanted to go to Hollywood and become a director, you know. But at the time, they were kind of just pushing broadcasting, you know. And it's probably the same way today. You have to start with some podunk station, then work you up to another station, then another, then maybe you'll get a flagship like, you know, WABC, and then maybe the network, you know. But at that time, they weren't paying anything, you know, for that. You know, it was a lot of goodwill. So I went into federal law enforcement. I went to Border Patrol, and then I went back to Chicago and was at immigration for about a year. Then I got in with the Diplomatic Security Service, the State Department, and that was the best time of my life. And being able to travel the whole world like that, I can really draw a lot of fodder from my imagination to put in there. And real life, you know, experiences, you know, people I've met, etc., and places I've been to, you know. But you know, but I hate authors that don't do the research. Like, well, remember when Da Vinci Code came out? Oh my God, they just brought out the knives, you know. But I remember one said something about he was in Rome and there was a meter on the cab, and he said, "There's no meters on the cabs in Rome." But see, now I would never allow myself to make a silly mistake like that. You know, if I was going to write that, I would make sure that there were meters on the cab. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm not really that anal retentive, but when it comes to my writing, I try to be. You know, and nowadays between the internet and all the information on YouTube, you really have no excuse to. You don't have to leave your chair to do the research and make notes on it, right?
no, you don't. And I mean, so my part-time day job that I do a few days a week, just to make sure that there's a few days a week I put on pants and get out of the house. I work.
Well, I'm wearing my JAMA pants. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah. I work at a library, and actually research is not that hard. It's just it can be tedious, but it's worth putting in the effort.
You go to the library? Actually,
I work at a library. Yeah.
Oh, you work there part-time. Yeah, I was trying
yeah.
to do that, but it's like everybody and his brother's already got a job there, you know, and it's not like, well, you could say it's not like you get to sit and read books. They've got you, you know, work at the front desk, catalyzing, you know, putting books back on the shelf, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Well,
anyway, are your books in the libraries there?
Yeah, my books are in my local library, the city one. I actually work at a university library. So a lot of what my day job actually involves is teaching students how to research.
Oh, really? That's good. Yeah, it's just, I think it's like, you know, what bothers me, my wife, she's got 2 degrees and PhDs in psychology, but the last 6 months she just substituted the 6th grade. They're not teaching kids cursive anymore, which if they go and they get a master's or a PhD and they want to do research, they won't be able to read a letter from George Washington to Thomas Jefferson in cursive or anything. I don't understand why they would stop teaching these kids cursive writing. They all print.
Yeah, it probably is because everything's moving digital. I mean, that's the hard truth is that we're moving everything. I mean, even at the university I work at, we've reached a point where most of the time, if we can get new items, new books, new journals, if we can get it online, we'll get the online version instead of a physical copy. And a lot of that is just everything is moving to digital. You know, the letters that you're talking about that they wouldn't be able to read in cursive, how many of them these days is there a typed up version of where somebody has already transcribed what it says?
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to be a historian, you've got to be able to read cursive because you
A
want to get
hundred
back to the
percent.
very source, you know?
A hundred
And
percent. But how many of those kids are going to be historians? They will
well, I know
choose.
I keep telling
Yeah.
my wife, I said, it's only sixth grade, honey. Just relax. It's like,
Yeah.
she's worried about,
Yeah.
well, he doesn't do crap. Why should I even give him a grade? I said, honey, you're not going to flunk him in sixth grade, you know?
Yeah.
But there is hope. Some of them are very, very bright, you know, and they,
Yeah.
like, right now they've been studying Percy, and it's like that fantasy that was really popular with kids, Percy and the
The
Monsters
Percy
or something
Jackson.
like that. Yeah, Percy Jackson. So
Yeah.
they
Rick Riordan. Yeah.
so they had to do workup on all of the Greek god and goddesses, and some of them really researched it on the computer and really, but they asked questions like, well, if Zeus was the number one god, how could he be knocking up all these women and have all these different women in his life? You know, what was with their morals back then? And they said, well, you know, they humanized their gods, you know, just like we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I was always hugely into mythology. That was one of my big draw cards, even from a young child. I was very into reading ancient mythologies and myths and legends and things like that. And yeah, I think, I mean, that's one of the things too, is that part of the thing about the gods was that they were, in so many ways, they were an amoral study on humanity, you know? They were that powerful. They didn't have to have the morals that humans did. They could do as they pleased. And what did that reflect on us?
Yeah. I mean, well, I was raised a Catholic, but that's gone way to the wayside after everything. But when you think about the Old Testament with Christianity, it was a vengeful, jealous God, very much just like the Greek gods were, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, I think it's a natural human tendency to try to personify your God as a human being because you can't conceptualize, you know, like if you talk to somebody about evolution, you talk it's billions of years, they can't even comprehend 1,000 years ago, you know, really, you know, it's kind of beyond our comprehensions a little bit. So what would you say with this series? Like when I was reading about Vincent, I kind of pictured Hugh Jackman in that Van Helsing film, you know, because he's kind of like a demon fighter, etc. But he's a swordsman, and you know, he's a real kind of Indiana Jones, actually, kind of, right?
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
was
he
your
is.
so? What do you think was your inspiration for him?
So the way that I often pitch the Vincent Temple books is to say that it's kind of like Lovecraftian horror meets Indiana Jones meets The Witcher.
Oh, okay, that's good.
So the
Yeah,
three of those kind of, you know, so it absolutely is a bit of an Indiana Jones vibe. Funnily enough, Gateway to Dark Stars wasn't originally my idea or my concept. Hear me out.
Yeah.
My brother is an artist, and he's done most of my covers. He did the covers for these books, and many years ago now, Gateway to Dark Stars began its life as a concept for a comic book that the two of us were going to do together. And I said to my brother, you know, I was like, look, I can write anything. You have to draw all of this. So tell me what story you want to tell. And so we sat down and we worked this thing out together. We workshopped it, and it was a lot of his ideas. You know, it was stuff that my brother was into and that kind of thing. And he wanted this, you know, this old grizzled monster hunter, and you know, the house of people that he's sort of living with that he's rescued, and this kind of thing. And cults and monsters and that kind of thing. My brother loves drawing monsters and that kind of stuff. And so we came up with this book together, and a lot of it was his inspiration. Yeah, so he built the monster for the cover.
Well, I have to say, I mean, he's doing a good job because I see so many of these books flooding Amazon, they're using Chat GPT to generate these covers,
Yeah.
and they look kind of doesn't look professional. It's
No, it's
you
yeah,
can
there's a
tell
lot
right
of
away somebody just created it that way, and I don't want. I used Bing because I did something different with Predator. I actually created images of the characters and put them into the novel. So you kind of like, I guess I was thinking,
yeah.
you don't have to, you can still imagine him, but this is what he really looks like. So I thought with today's readers, with their limited attention spans, I thought it wouldn't hurt to have a lot of illustrations in there.
It absolutely doesn't. Well, it's quite funny. I remember a conversation with my parents actually, because they're polar opposites on this. My mum is very much of the stance: do not give me images. I'm going to imagine these people. I don't care what you think they look like. It's my book now. I'm reading it. And she doesn't. She wants to be able to imagine everything for herself. But I remember a conversation with my dad where he was like, "Oh, you've done all these little character sketches. You should include them in the book. It really helps me when I'm reading to have this image and to be like, oh, okay, so that's what this person looks like." And everyone's different. And yeah, definitely, like if you've got it, include it, because there will be people out there who love it, and anyone who doesn't want it, they can ignore it.
And most of the younger generation, they're just used to streaming and movies. They don't really activate the
Yeah.
imagination center in their brain. So I think it'll work. I'll just see it. I'm having a little bit of a tough time with this one because Amazon's just drowning in books now. It's crazy. But when I did Solomon's Key, the CODIS project, well, remember it took Dan Brown 5 years to write a sequel to the Da Vinci Code? And so I
Yeah.
jumped on that bandwagon and I got a film option with the very first draft. I just self-published of it, so it was easy to get an agent because when you got money waving under their nose, then, yeah, sure, I don't know who you are, but I'll come on board with you. But this one, oh God, it just, and I guess the other thing is, I think in horror, you've still got a pretty good blend of male, female authors. But if you've noticed with thrillers, it's almost all female authors now. I mean, there's a couple of, there's James Patterson and Lee Child, right? But, you look up thrillers on Amazon and everyone's a female author with a female protagonist. So now let me ask you a question. Being a guy, I kind of have a hard time writing female characters. I usually make them very intelligent, very gutsy, and usually actually smarter than the hero. Now, how do you write guys since you're a woman?
Same way I write any character. I think for me, I for me, gender doesn't really play into it. I come up with a character, the gender doesn't really matter. It will become important depending on the world that they're in and how people will interact with them. But in terms of who they are as a person, it doesn't really stand out as something particularly important. And I guess it would be up to readers to decide whether or not that works for them. I've never had anyone come along and say, I don't, you're terrible at writing men. What are you doing? But obviously, each their own.
No, I wouldn't. It's kind of like if I didn't know who wrote your book, I wouldn't have assumed it was a female author at all. But I remember I tried to read Patricia Cromwell once, and I think in the second chapter, she had almost a whole page of a recipe for tuna salad. And I'm like, what? Why would you, who wants to read a recipe in a thriller? So I gotta admit, I don't really read too many thriller authors at all. I just can't. It's kind of like, to me, they're like Lifetime movies, or Hallmark movies, and they have to have a happy ending, and the woman finds a dead body, and her, or coworker is abducted, or there's always a central female character. But I remember you've read James Patterson, right, in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time I read an Alex Cross book, I just grabbed it and started reading it. I thought, wow, this is a great Black Afro-American author. My God, he's right in the head of Black people and what it's like to live in the district and everything. Then I went to the back and looked at the picture and went, how the fuck does he do this? I mean, he's not the best writer in the world, but he's really good at it. I mean, I don't think you or I could capture a Black family living in the district the way he does, And did you ever notice the way, because when you're writing a series, you got to assume that people have never read the previous books in the series. It's like their first time. So I was kind of looking through as to see how he got it across who Alex Cross was. But I remember there was a scene where he's at his home, he's at the piano, he's playing a tune that the grandma likes, and he's looking at these refrigerator drawings. He just peppers it in there lightly, and instead of giving a whole paragraph of exposition about where he is and how the kids are and all that. And I think that's his greatest strength. Of course, it's total BS that he's writing these 20 books a year. Come on, but I guess if I was getting $1 million advance or close to it for every book, I'd co-author everything too, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to go ahead?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think for a lot of authors, once you've reached that kind of success, once you've made that kind of money, you can just do whatever you want.
It's
can't
true.
you? Because you're not writing for the money anymore. You're just writing for the joy of it. If what you want to do is team up with 20 other people a year and co-write some books and just have some fun with it, that's what you're going to do.
But I remember reading that at first he didn't give the collaborator any credit at all. Didn't put him on the cover or anything. He was just like, I'm mentoring you, But now he does, and what was I just going to say? Brain fart. Can't remember. Anyway, let me go back to my questions quick. So to sum up your view on horror, you'd much rather watch Rosemary's Baby than Friday the 13th.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think so from what you told me.
Yeah.
Well, that's another one I was going to say too. These young authors I'm seeing and the filmmakers, like I said, John Ferris, who did The Fury and a bunch of books, and Ira Levine, who did Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby. Polanski said he didn't even hardly need a script because the book is so lean and every scene is right there. They just filmed the book, And it's kind of my goal to totally get to that point, Although they show that diagram, here's the script or the book, and then there's this right, this right, this right. By the time it actually gets to be the final draft, it's about this big, right? So, yeah. Did I ask you if you ever collaborated, try to write with somebody?
I have, but only on things like film scripts, not books.
Oh, you've been working on scripts.
I live with a bunch of amateur filmmakers. So obviously, I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand. Everyone in Wellington's a filmmaker. If they tell you that they're not, they're lying.
Great.
This is where Peter Jackson made Lord of the Rings. Everyone in this city is tied into the film industry somehow, in some way. So
can you interject your input and tell them to stop making nothing but slasher films?
I don't think that's what we're generating down here.
Oh, really?
But yeah, we're all sorts. So actually, to be honest, this weekend, so it's first thing in the morning here. But we're gearing up this evening for this weekend. It's Friday morning, and yeah, and this weekend, actually, my flatmates and I and a group of our friends who we work with quite a lot, we're part of. We've entered into the annual 48-hour film competition. So this weekend, from Friday night to Sunday night, we will be making a film in 48 hours.
That's
Yeah.
You think of Roger Corman or something? I think he made little. He said he made Little Shop of Horrors in 4 days. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. Well, not a feature length, fortunately. I think the requirements are that the film be 1 to 5 minutes max. So short films.
Hey,
but
are any of these films on YouTube? I could see some of them.
They absolutely are. But I've got to say that the quality ranges massively.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what. Later, email me one you think is worth watching because I'm really
All right.
curious. I'd like to see something really good happen. Well, there is this one I saw. It was called Markings of a Murder, but unlike the other ones, the lighting was right. The acting was good, the sound was good, and the camera work was good. Almost cinematography was used. But just shooting something like what was that terrible movie they made, Cloverfield, where it was all like live action with somebody following them all around with a camera. Those movies just drive me. You can use a little of that, but not for the whole damn movie. It's been done, and it doesn't lend to any cinematography, any beautiful lighting or anything. Yeah, it's like Go ahead.
I have a sneaking suspicion it's cheap to make. A lot of stuff gets made the way it gets made because it's cheaper.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I can understand that, but I mean, if you're going to really make a movie, you got to get the funding in advance. Just like in our business, once you've made it, you should be able to just put in a proposal and get the advance on that. But it's still astounding that these movies are costing like $100 million, $150 million for one movie, but I guess when they make back almost $1 billion, it's worth the effort, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you're young enough. You might still end up in Hollywood.
I don't want to end up in Hollywood, if I'm completely honest. a good.
You would or you wouldn't? I didn't. You would or you wouldn't? I didn't hear.
Oh, I don't want to end up in Hollywood. Yeah,
you have to kind of sell your soul, There was that great scene in the Ed Wood movie with Johnny Depp where he played Ed Wood, and he comes storming out of the bathroom when they're shooting this stupid movie, dressed as Glenda with the Angora sweater. And he goes to the bar, and who's there but Orson Welles, and they're both drinking and saying, "I hate fucking producers." And Welles goes, "I hate producers too. They want to control all my product," But that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, and it's rough as an author because they don't even want you on the set or anything, if they do make your movie. I think the one I think is the most smartest was J.K. Rowling's, because before well, usually, you got a book, it's a bestseller, and then somebody wants to make a movie of it. You just take the money, right? But no, she put in the contracts, I want final approval on the finished film, and I want final approval on the script, She's been,
and as long as you've
totally
got as long as you've got the power to do that, I would always say do it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Dean Koontz made a big mistake just selling the rights off to the movies, and well, Stephen King's the first ones were terrible too. People love Salem's Lot, but it wasn't very good. But when William Goldwyn got a hold of the script and he did Misery, and then he did Hearts in Atlantis, it was, I remember seeing the movie, then I got the book, and I'm like, this is only the first 40 pages of the book. He threw out all the rest of the book. But I know why. It was boring. It was about him playing cards in college. I mean, well, King writes they're not going to edit it, but it wasn't a bestseller book, but it was a great, great movie, really touching.
The best adaptions I always feel like the best adaptions are from short stories anyway. So if you can take the part of the book that was just the short story that actually had the guts in it and adapt that, then yeah, leave the rest.
Yeah, I think so. I just started
Make a better
watching
movie.
that Cabinet of Curiosities series that Guillermo del Toro put on.
Yeah,
They're pretty good. They're pretty good.
they
It's
are.
probably not
Yeah.
that popular because it's mainly Lovecraft, and people aren't going to really follow The Strange Case of Dexter Ward or whatever. But
Boo.
I know. I think it's great because they made that stupid Reanimator movie and a bunch of stuff, but he's never really had a. I think Nicolas Cage made that one, and I watched it. Can't remember what the name of the book was, but they kept the name of the book. And it was so, but Cage overacts so much. He just when he turned kind of manic and crazy, just off the charts. So, well, I think. Oh, do you have where can people get your books?
Probably Amazon is the best place. Yeah, I can send you through a link, and but on my all of my books are available on Amazon. They're all available on KU as well.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I decided to go with KU Unlimited because it just moves books better, I mean, you don't make any money off of it, but it's still good. Yeah. Have you done an audiobook?
We're working on it. So we've recorded the first one. It's being edited. I am very much hoping that it will be released later this year.
Oh, now who did you use for a narrator?
An actor down here that I know.
Oh, good.
Who has an
Real
amazing
actor.
voice. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He does voice work and live action stuff, but he just has such his parents are both radio hosts, and it shows. He just has the most amazing voice. So I hit him up and said, "Hey, can I?"
Yeah, well, mine's almost done. He's made the few corrections I found on it. Now he's going to add some music because I wanted to have some music. Since it's kind of a sunset noir, modern day noir, I wanted to have that breathy sax music played at the beginning of the opening chapters. And then the chase scene, I wanted some chase music. And then the satanic mass scene, I wanted some Gregorian chants. And there's a gong. So I said, put the damn gong in there. He was kind of against it, but I said, no, come on, just put it in. I'll give you another $100. So, but he was really upset at first because I have 5, I think, female characters. And one's Russian, one's Hungarian, the other 2 are pure, LA Americans. And then I got a little girl, and he's kind of but he actually did a pretty good job with the Russian. The Russian sounds quite a bit like the Mossad agent, but I don't think it's going to be that much that people will be astounded by it. I would have loved to have 2 narrators, a male and a female, but I couldn't afford that. Anyway, well, I think we about covered everything. Thank you. You're my first female guest. Actually, I don't know why the women writers are. Well, this guy that I was telling you about with Coming Soon, he's having trouble getting authors. He's getting all these filmmakers, but authors aren't jumping. I think maybe the problem is authors are kind of majority introverts, maybe. They don't want to be.
I was going to say we are predominantly recluses, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not really. I'm a people person, and when I was just writing full time, but you do make friends from writing, and you do make friends you maybe will never meet through the internet, But one last question: did you join a critique group?
Yeah, I've got quite a few different writing groups actually. I've got a regular writers club that we meet fortnightly and go over each other's work, anything we want and that kind of thing.
Fortnightly?
You might
have to translate that for us Americans.
Bi-weekly.
There you go. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
teasing
Sorry.
you. Yeah, that's true. I joined one too. There's a really good one in here in Dallas, and it's about 75% published authors. But oh wow,
Hmm.
the first couple things I got shredded. The one guy I read it, and he put up his hand and says, "Richard, when did you write that?" I said, "About 2 months ago." He said, "I thought maybe it was 1880 or the 20s or the 30s. Who the hell are you trying to copy?" And I said, "Oh, Poe or Lovecraft." And he went, "Really, Richard? It's 2019. You got to write today." And I don't know why, because the first book that inspired me to actually do it was Dean Koontz's Seize the Night, but I didn't absorb what he was actually doing, I guess. But it probably took me 5 years to be able to really write.
Yeah. And
Anyway,
I always,
well, thank you very much, Kate, and take care of that putty tat. Okay?
yeah,
And
thank you.
I'll try to get this up on YouTube next week, okay, if I can. But I'm getting this is my 4th podcast this week. I'm a little pooped.
Yeah, no worries.
Anyway,
Just let me know.
okay. Well, thank you
Yeah,
very much, and stay
thank you.
tuned for more from Echoes of the Inner Sanctum. And I've been thinking about retiring in New Zealand. Is the cost of living really high there or not?
Yeah,
Pretty
it is at the
much.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought. Okay, well, bye bye. Thank you, Kate.
Bye. Lovely meeting you.
Lovely meeting you.